Hey guys, welcome back to the Genesis Block podcast. Today we're going to do a thematic analysis again for you guys, and today's topic of analysis is the Web3 music industry. So with that, over to you, Sid.
Awesome. So, guys, like you mentioned, Web3 music is the topic of today. Just to set the agenda, first I'll just quickly go over, the history of the music industry, not too in depth, just the key items, which will give context to the next section, which is, the Web3 music promise, if you will. What the potential, what the technology says is possible, but not is yet has come to fruition. And then I'll touch upon what the current landscape is looking like. And then, of course, we'll just conclude with just some opinions or some, things to look out for in the near future and the long-term future, right? So with that, let's just begin. So I think the music industry is quite a unique industry, in the sense that, of course, all industries have been severely disrupted, reinvented by the evolution of technology. Music is no different from that context because you've had, since World War II, you've had music consumption mediums constantly in a state of flux from, vinyls, radio, Walkman, Apple iTunes, and then of course streaming services now, right? Um, but all throughout, the two things that have been pretty, that have remained unchanged. So one is that the music labels, have retained almost like a monopoly on just the influence they have on the industry. That's one. And second is, in terms of total value generated, music has always been seen as underwhelming, right? Absolute numbers is around 30 to 40 billion dollars, the total industry value. But if you compare that with, say, gaming, right, which is another form of entertainment, today it's at a 300 400 billion dollar industry value. Now, I also think that this is not, this discrepancy is indicative of some more fundamental issue. Because if you look at it, the top, the list of the world's wealthiest musicians, um, they have always generated their wealth through means outside of the music industry, right? And at the same time, a few examples of that before I move on is, Dre making most of his wealth through the deal with Beats, right? And therefore the Apple stock he received. Kanye with Yeezys, Rihanna with Fenty, and Diddy with Ciroc, the vodka brand. Um, so if you just compare this with the fact that, 6 of the top 10 most followed individuals on social media are indeed musicians, right? So there is some contradiction here between how much cultural value music and musicians hold and the total value that's generated by the industry, right? Um, so this is a quick context, quick history, to keep in mind as we discuss going forward. Um, Now, just coming to the present, the key stakeholders, right, of the music industry, like I mentioned, definitely the labels. That's one. Second are the songwriters, composers. Third is the recording artists, who we, colloquially termed as the music artist. Then you have the DSPs, aka, the Spotify's, the Apple Music's, the streaming services essentially. And then you have the publishers and the distributors. Now, we don't need to know what exactly, role each person does, because, I mean, to be honest, this industry, while organized, is quite um, fragmented, from the sense of there are a lot of moving parts, a lot of variables. But the main people or main stakeholders to be aware of, like we already mentioned, are the artists themselves and the labels, right? And DSPs, now that they've, in recent times, really just got have become very integral part of the whole value chain, right? Um, so DSPs, labels, and artists, right? Now, with those as the main stakeholders, um, it's interesting to know that right now, the cost of music production, right, is at an all-time low via softwares like various digital audio workstations, like you have Pro Tools, you have Logic. So basically the software you need to create studio level quality tracks are now accessible on your laptop, right? So that has really made it super easy for artists to, or anyone, to create music. But at the same time, the cost of discovery of music, right, has it's at an all-time high, because there's just so much of it now. So coming back to the stakeholders, the record company, or the labels, um, initially back in the day, their primary tasks were scouting the artist, um, financing the production, the music production, distributing, right? And distributing at that time was actual hardware, like physical vinyls, and the relationship with retail stores, um, and then of course the marketing, right? Or as it's known in the industry as A&R, which is basically not just marketing but also developing the artist, more like a mentor-esque role. But of course, now what's happening is the labels, in terms of distribution, it's really there's no real distribution anymore, right? In the sense, their relationship with retailers is quite useless, because most of the music consumption happens digitally, um, and of course, that's possible only because the file types are digital. You don't need vinyls and physical CDs and whatnot. um, and and so just and of course, scouting, and scouting also has become much easier because of social media. Anyone can really go and find new artists, of course assuming the artist is on social media, which is it's a fair assumption nowadays, right? So what I'm trying to get at is the labels, while of course they offer really, they offer value to the industry, that value has been diminishing over time. Now, if you ask me, the most significant role is attributed to, say, financing, right? Actually providing the money, which, as we'll discuss, is arguably is also going to go away with the rise of crowdfunding via crypto and whatnot. But also, the other main thing is just marketing now, right? Just being able to these relationships with, say, the DSPs, to get to, say, the key the high value real estate on Spotify, like the new playlist of the day or whatever it may be. So it's become marketing. So their value add is reduced over time, right? And this is causing a lot of this. This is where the issues step, right? Now, before I take a pause, let me just go through the issues, right? To just wrap this up full circle. Um, like I mentioned, the industry value is suboptimal, right? Um, as a result of this, creator monetization, or like artist monetization for the long tail of artists, is unsustainable, right? To say the least. Um, that's a really big issue, right? Only the top 0.1% really make any money. And when they make money, they make a really lot of money. But the vast majority cannot sustain a living of just music production. Second issue is, in the industry, there are too many middlemen, right? There is a reason for this. One is, of course, just because back in the day it was a much more complex endeavor to create a song and manufacture it and distribute to the retailers and whatnot, but also because of content rights, right? What about a song that has been developed or created by, say, 10-15 various entities, and then has been played live halfway across the world, which has different legal constraints and whatnot. So just to solve for that, there's many middlemen, which of course is a reason, one of the reasons why creator monetization is very difficult, because each middleman takes a cut. Another issue is that, um, and of course, all these issues are interlinked. These are not in isolation or anything like that. Another issue is that royalties uh, are very, I mean, they're very hefty, of course, because labels require um, a large percentage of the future revenues by a creator, because, as I mentioned earlier, they actually finance the creation of the art before the art is made. So in essence, as we mentioned in the audios episode, they are like VCs, right? They have to make bets on many artists, out of which maybe one or two will do well, which will recoup the losses of the rest. So they have to inherently take a lot of future money from the artists themselves, right? And one more thing on the royalties is, because of the various middlemen and all, just the lead time, right? Um, from when the royalty is earned to when it's actually distributed can go from anywhere from months to years, which is again, not really good. Um, another thing which is very another issue which is very large is metadata inconsistency, right? Now it's a bit difficult to really understand why this is so without being from the industry, but um, one way to think about it is every DSP or every streaming service has its own proprietary algorithm to for discovery and whatnot, um, and each of them require their own unique metadata, or set of metadata, right? So for each artist to distribute their song to each DSP in their own unique metadata, with the same time of having those deadlines to hit by various entities, things get a bit messy, right? That's just one example, but I think that should give you a picture, right? And this of course is an issue when it comes to artist discovery. So when the metadata is not correct, the streaming services cannot really find the necessary artist to show to the user, but also royalties, then the calculation goes haywire. So that's why this is a very big issue, in fact. Another point which is relates to the first point I made, which of the industry valuing less, is that the rapid evolution of technology, and especially something like a Napster coming into existence, and since then say something like a Spotify or Apple Music, which allows basically, or even YouTube for that matter, free streaming, right? Of course for ads, but still, so it's for all intents purposes free. Has made the willingness for the average user to pay for music, it's like it's gone to zero, right? Almost. um we don't really, it's we see it as a commodity, the average user. So it's hard really to monetize via pure streaming, which is the main form really of consumption of the product of this industry. So there is an interesting conflict there. And lastly, and I think this was well elucidated by a multi-coin by Kyle Samani, that the labels and the artists, right, even though they are on prima facie working together, the evolution that I've just described, right, over time of the whole industry has made it so that labels optimize for revenue streams, because that's where um, their compensation, their financial upside comes from. But at the same time, artists, they're optimizing for non-streaming revenues, because their financial upside comes majority from that. And to really, and the reason this is so is because of the way music copyright and music licensing exists. I won't get into the nitty-gritty details of this, but essentially, there is a set of royalties that are assigned for a music stream, whereas there's different royalties for a live performance of the same music. So because of such phenomena in the industry, this claim is in fact true, right? So yeah, so I mean, uh just there's some interesting statistics, right? I mean, if you look at the music streaming revenue in 99, or I should say, revenue from music consumption in 99 was higher than in 2018, right? So that those numbers support um, all these various issues that I'm mentioning. And another last thing I'll just say before I take a pause is, from 1 million plays on Spotify, you'd make less than $4,000 as of 2020, um, which is absurd, right? I mean,
Yeah, it's
I mean,
absurdly low.
yeah. So yeah. So I'll take a pause here. Yash, any Any thoughts, comments, questions?
Yeah, so I just want to like kind of summarize what everything you said. So if you look at music, let's say in the 60s and 70s, as you said, the cost of music production was quite high because there was no digital, like, there was no laptops, computers where people could just go and make music. They had to buy instruments, they had to find other people to make music with, like a band, etc. Then they had to make the music somehow. Then they had to go to a record label and convince them to fund, them recording the album or the EP or whatever. And then after that, the record label sets the terms entirely, and the artist was just kind of at the mercy of the record label. So because of this, they've accumulated a lot of power and wealth over the years. So they can be thought of as the biggest VC funds of the world, but for music. So like a Sequoia or something, even though in today's day and age, people don't, value a Sequoia deal as much as they used to because it's become so commonplace. And, you know, now there are so many other VC funds that are new. There are also private investors that are big names, so there's a complete shift, and that shift should also come to the music industry because that cost of production has gone down. So that means a lot more entrants have come into the market, lots more artists recording. But if music labels accrue all of that value, newer artists are not incentivized to come in and make more music, right? So because the cost of production has gone down, but at the same time, the cost of streaming music has also gone down. The total amount of money available in the industry is lower or stagnant, as you said, from your revenue figures, right? But if record labels are still accruing all the value for even newer entrants coming in, the industry as a whole is not going to grow. So you need a way to kind of cut out the middleman so that all this, revenue, which is still flat, gets accrued straight to the artist, because actually they're getting less and less of the pie as time goes on instead of more and more. So, I mean, I guess crypto is a way that people think can flip that whole narrative and change the relationships between, artists and fans, and kind of ensure that even if a artist has a limited number of fans, if people are incentivized to help them monetize in the right way by, let's say, helping them invest in early NFT drops, etc., then they can get a cut of the artist revenue, and fans can become investors instead of fans just listening and not really, even if they love an artist, they can't really participate in the artist's success. And record labels, they don't really care about the artist, they just care about making money. So basically the record label needs to be taken out of this equation to balance it out now, because it's becoming more and more
Correct.
unsustainable.
Absolutely. And just to, put some, just to really run through an example to drive home the point of why labels are, such a big issue in the industry today. An average deal, from a label to an up and coming artist, someone who has, say, a million or a couple million streams on Spotify. So someone who's an someone who's an established up and comer, right? The average deal they would get is something like, $500,000 advance, right? But at the same time, they would have to do an 80-20 split of the rights of their the content that they create, 80-20 to the label, right? And this whole structure would last for around 3 projects or 30 songs, the lower off. And at the same time, they would have to stick and abide by this for around 10 to 15 years before they can request ownership back. So if you just think about it, you don't need $500,000 to create 30 songs. With $500,000 you can create so much more, right? And of course, you can talk about marketing if it comes in handy in marketing. But to give up 80-20, 80% of your revenues, does it make sense? Are there alternate methods? I think many would agree there are, right? So yeah, so I mean, I think that perfectly encapsulates how predatory their deals are at the given in today's day and age, right? So, but you're absolutely right that there are Web3 introduces um, you know uh, other ways which increase the total pie essentially of the industry. So I'll just get into that now. And to kick things off, I think it's a very interesting stat that Cooper Turley, someone who's really knee deep in the space, mentioned in one of his podcasts that 25 NFTs sold at zero point 0.1 ETH is equal to 1 million revenues on a streaming service, right?
1 million streams.
Yeah, 1
Okay.
million streams. So I mean, 0.1 ETH is not less money, but I think the point that this brings out is that you need you need to reach a substantially low amount of people to generate the same amount of value, right? And I think the broader point here is one, of course, crypto does financialize the music industry to a certain extent, like it does for any industry. But at the same time, it really creates deeper relationships and allows for deeper engagement between artists and fans, right? And I think that the
Yeah.
second point is very overlooked right now, maybe given the narrative of crypto. Um, right? So yeah, with that, I've noted down a couple, reasons why I think Web3 makes sense. Web3 technologies make sense for fans and artists. So let's just go through that, and then maybe if you have something to add on to that, or maybe something I missed out, right? We can go over those two. So from the fan side, starting off, um, I think definitely social status and bragging rights, right, is something that is very, very, that we've already seen provably, right? I mean, we went over this even in our NFT episode, right? How to analyze a NFT project. Uh, so just to, give some more insight, imagine you discovered an artist, right? Um, right now, I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but like I'm someone who really loves music, so I take pride in having discovered, say, an artist before they really blow up. But right now it's limited to just making that claim. But with NFTs, right, which is the main use case, right, of music or of Web3 in the music context, I can do that provably, and I can, which brings me to the next point. I can actually participate in the upside of that NFT or that artist if he or she blows up, right? So far we have social status or bragging rights. Second, we have financial appreciation, financial upside. Um, and third, from a fan perspective, I think Web3 is really good because it allows for, like I was mentioning earlier, a more direct engagement or relationship with artists. And one example of this is if I have bought an NFT super early on in an artist's career, the artist knows that I've done that, provably. So when he wants to reward his, early fans or his super fans, then he can directly reach out to me, and I can actually, experience whatever he or she has in mind, which is not which is possible in today's technology with Web2 technologies, but it just has much more friction to actually do so. Uh, Essentially because of the provenance that doesn't exist with centralized databases. Um, so yeah, I think from a fan perspective, those are the main three things. Do you have any anything to add on to that?
Uh, yeah, I mean, the main problem that, crypto kind of solves for is the fundraising part for artists, right? So let's say an artist wants to, raise money or needs money to
Mhm.
produce a kick-ass album, and he maybe has one track, but he wants to produce that full album. He would traditionally have to, either scrape by money from friends and family, or you'd have to approach a record label and give away a large part of his earnings. But what crypto does is it allows like investments to be crowdsourced from a bunch of people who actually want you to succeed and don't just look at you as just another investment, right? Because a record label, even though they may invest in you, they might not love your music or be aligned with your values or what kind of cultural message you're trying to bring out. They just are looking at, can this guy make us money, right? Or can this girl make us money? But with crypto, you release a song, for example, or you have a following, and let's say, you have a decent enough following, then you decide to drop an NFT project or some kind of token. Your closest fans will be following you, and instead of like a record label coming and investing, your closest fans can come in and invest and be a part of your success. And this kind of relationship between artist and fan it has never been financial, right? It's always been, I love the music, and it's always kind of bragging rights to your friend, for example, like I discovered this song first, etc. But your friend, it's not really provable, and you're not really gaining anything out of it. Now you can prove to other people that, hey, I found this guy before, he is blown up now, and I was, part of him achieving that success, and I'm also profiting from it, right? So there's way more reasons now for users to actually go and try and discover music, etc., because now they can participate in the upside. Obviously, the model has not been figured out exactly as to, how would you drop an NFT project and design it, and what cut of your profits would you give to, your NFT holders, etc. But that's probably going to be solved, in the near future. But the idea still is very solid, quite clearly.
Absolutely. And I think your point perfectly segues to the artist benefits from Web3 technology. So one, like you rightfully mentioned, is the new paradigm for artist financing, and as a corollary, um, artist discovery, right? Because financing, of course, you can crowdsource from your super fans, early adopters, and at the same time, then they have a vested financial interest to tell people about that, right? So it's almost like organic marketing, you could call it, right? And not just the early adopters, even people, say for example, I have bought an NFT super early on in an artist's career, and I gifted to someone. Now the person I've gifted it to, even though they are not an early adopter per se, they still have a vested interest to make this artist, more known, right? So I think artist financing and artist discovery is very, very important points that you mentioned. On top of that, I think, on the flip side, from user benefiting from direct fan artist engagement, of course, artists also benefit from that, and they can actually do that via, so token gating, essentially via social tokens or NFTs. So that's definitely works both ways. um, of course, like we also mentioned, is that NFTs and um, tokens, really, they act as a new monetization channel altogether, right? As of now, artists are earning via, streams, essentially, and I'm talking about within the music industry, they're earning from music streams, and so digital consumption and physical consumption, right? Physical means going on the road, touring, and of course then you have merchandise, right? But NFTs is essentially a new product altogether, right? So like I mentioned earlier, 25 NFTs sold at zero point 0.1 ETH is equal to 1 million streams. But those two aren't, either or. They both can exist. So you're essentially increasing the pie, right? So that's something that's very interesting. And at the same time, NFTs allows for um, value to be captured even when content is, like, remixed, right? So going back to the one of the core tenets of of Web3 and crypto is, composability, right? Now with NFTs, something that's interesting that's happening is, from a song, or I mean, this is being experimented with. From a song, each stem, or like each, atomic unit of that song is being, you know be is being created into an NFT, and then,
So, for example, like the drum, the
correct.
bass, the different instruments, beats, etc., they're all broken down into their constituent parts, and they can be individually monetized as well.
Yeah, exactly. And, like, uh, I can, propose, create a song, have these individual parts as NFTs, and then someone else can use the exact same components, but mix them up in a completely different manner. But I will still gain some upside, right? So while composability is happening, and art is being created on top of my original art, I'm still, participating in the upside if that does well, right?
Right.
So that's another super interesting part. Another benefit from artists is when you have on-chain, on-chain data, then you can imagine a world where a good, some portion of royalties, at least, if not all, can become more transparent and much more efficient in terms of when it's earned and when it's actually distributed. Maybe not all, maybe there will still be some edge cases, or maybe there could be significant number of cases, but at least you can imagine a world where royalties from some sources do reach the um, rightful owner quickly, instantaneously, ideally, right? um, so that's also something that's interesting. And last thing I'll mention is, you know um, artists get more autonomy really in monetization, right? One is, of course, if they just own more of their rights, they can choose to monetize however they like. But native to crypto, right, is something like micropayments. Micropayments were just, because of their very nature, difficult to process on existing financial infrastructure. But crypto is changing that, and now artists can, just choose to only stream a song if they get, say, 0.001% or 0.001 dollar or whatever currency, right? But key point is they are deciding that. It's not been told to them by, say, Spotify or someone. Another interesting example of this is there was a whole concept of the Bowie bonds. So David Bowie, famous artist, he back in the day conceptualized this, where essentially, he sold these Bowie bonds as, financial instruments, um, and promised the purchasers future cash flows of his music. So the same thing is possible, but just with more sophisticated technology. Whereas I'm sure he had to, jump through significant hurdles to actually make this possible. And to be honest, I'm not too sure how successful it was, but the concept is very sound, right? And crypto definitely allows for this to happen. Maybe it's, DeFi is still in a very nascent state, but you can see how this could play out, right? Um, so yeah, I think this is I think we've covered at least the main benefits of Web3 from a Web3 music from a fan perspective and an artist perspective, right? Um, cool. So I think I'll just close this part off by saying that there's this interesting, flywheel that Cooper Turley also mentioned in collaboration with Bankless, that it's all starts the whole music Web3 music ecosystem, but also, I guess, the creator economy ecosystem, because music NFTs and music Web3 is a subset of that. Um, it begins with content, right? Um, and then the content leads to collection, which is one of the novelties of Web3, right? Because you can own something, and this collection leads to community building, which then leads to new content being created, right? By UGC and whatnot. Um, and this is essentially how the whole flywheel starts for an artist to actually use Web3 technologies um, to sustain a living, really, which was not possible earlier. And one thing I will add to this is, I think it's not just collection as a middle step. I think it's collection and curation, right? Because when only the initial believers of any content or any artist actually spend the time to, make it accessible and make and really develop the narrative of that particular artist, only then does a community actually, develop. So I think it's content, then collection and curation. Communities then get built, which then leads to content, and then, the flywheel starts. um, so I think that wraps up this section. Shall I just move on to the current landscape?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, awesome. So I'll just share my screen. Um, there's this really interesting map that Cooper Turley once again has put together, and that'll just tell you where exactly we are, right? Give me 1 second. Okay. I think it should be up. Yeah, it's visible.
Yep.
So as you see, I mean, definitely, I think right now we are very, very early on in this space, more so than even I say DeFi, which is also early on, but you can already see that there's a lot of experimentation going on, and a lot of experimentation going on in all the various aspects of the industry, right? So from say just pure streaming, so distribution, right? In today's uh, in today's industry, in today's industry structure. So your audience we've already covered, but there are also four five others. Then you have in terms of royalties, you have three four companies trying to attack that particular vertical. You have Web3 native labels, right? That are leveraging the whole concept of a DAO to really focus on what labels should actually be doing because of the aforementioned disconnect that has really evolved in recent times. Then you have music Web3 native companies just targeting events, right? What does a Web3 native event look like? One example is metaverse concerts. I think that's something that's, I would arguably say, post proof of concept stage, right? Because it's already existed, it's already happened, and the reception has been good. For example, the Travis Scott concert and Ariana Grande concert, and I think it was Fortnite or Roblox was one of the metaverses, right? Um, so you agencies, you have collectibles, right? Um, you have research, right? So you have literally every single aspect of the industry is being experimented, tinkered with, and I think, of course, consolidation is needed. I definitely think a lot of these projects are overlapping, and an example of that would be just NFT marketplaces, right? So you have the likes of Sound that are that allow artists to mint NFTs in addition. So like you could have 50 NFTs of one particular song, and then and users can go and purchase that. And then at the same time, you have something like a catalog, which allows the same thing, but they only allow one of ones, right? Um, and then you have something like a royal, which really focuses on um, the niche of royalty distribution. So if an artist you mint your song, the user actually, when he buys it, it's always going to have a royalty distribution, or that's the niche that they're focusing on, right? So I think they're all entering with uh, at different focuses, with different focuses, but I think consolidation is definitely something to look out for going forward, right? And then of course we have something like a Zora, which we covered, which is at a more fundamental layer, right, in terms of NFT metadata, which is not just restricted to music but also all media types, really, right? So I think, yeah, do you have any questions on how the current landscape is shaping up?
Not a question, just a observation that clearly this is so fragmented right now, and it's going forward as we see in most tech. There's always an initial period where there's lots of innovation happening, lots of new entrants, lots of companies, protocols building things, but it always leads to consolidation in the future. And we've seen that with Web2 companies as well, where there's lots of competition for Spotify and Apple Music in the past. There's lots of different streaming services, and now it's kind of consolidated into Apple Music, Spotify, and maybe two, three others like Pandora, Tidal, maybe SoundCloud, YouTube. But by and large, the industry is consolidated into these five or six streaming services, and everyone now accesses music mainly through streaming services, right? So there needs to be a Web3 or crypto version of a streaming service that has the UI and the ease of use as a Spotify or an Apple Music, but with better creator monetization and fan engagement possible through that app. And how whoever solves for this problem is probably unlocking an insane amount of value and keep it, because it's a more efficient model as compared to Spotify or Apple Music, because you're moving from platforms to protocols, which is the whole thesis of crypto in general, where platforms were great. They allowed, rapid scaling and mass usage of certain tech, but it always was poor monetization because the platform would accrue the most value and the creators and the users would be left with nothing. And again, crypto is trying to flip that. And in this case, it's no different. So you want to build a protocol that will do the same thing a platform can, but reward the users of the stakeholders of that ecosystem better.
Yep. I think yeah, I think that's absolutely bang on. Um, so I mean, I think it's difficult to say when this evolution will happen. But you know, I guess time will tell. Um, but yeah, just wrapping this up on how current artists are really using, you know, the technology at the moment. I think it's fairly, I can count them on my fingers really. You have, of course, you have your, music NFTs sold as one of ones or, editions. That's primarily as collectibles, right? Then you have a fractional ownership of songs, so royalties can be, distributed amongst the early, people who bought the NFT or whatnot. Then you have, NFTs distributed on or during live events, just as a proof of attendance, right? And then of course you have with utility NFTs, which can be incorporated in any of the above three that I mentioned, um, but basically giving access, various forms of access. I think this is primarily right, the way music NFTs are being used. Have you come across um, any other,
I mean, I think I don't know. I've not really come across too many models that make sense to me yet. But if I had to do it a certain way, it would be that there should be a protocol which works like Spotify, but it's not gated the way Spotify is. So anyone can go and upload content to this particular protocol. Maybe you need to pay a minimum fee to upload it. And then every time a user probably plays your content or likes your song or saves it to a playlist, they pay a small microtransaction for that amount. Okay. So overall, it should be that the user pays the same amount, because even though, Web2 platforms like Spotify, Apple Music take a lot of the value, it's still really good for the user, right? Because you're paying, maybe $10 a month, but you're getting unlimited access to whatever music you want. You can download as many songs as you realistically want to. So it needs to be a similar experience, but at the same time, all this value, all these microtransactions, etc., whatever users are paying, it'll all go mostly directly to the artists themselves. So as a whole, even though the user is paying the same amount, the artist will earn a lot more because the platform is not taking a massive cut in the middle,
mm,
right? And they can structure it in such a way that the protocol will take less money than a Spotify, but it'll still take some money, because the creators of the protocol need some incentive to make the protocol in the first place, right? Because no
mm,
one's trying to make stuff for free, obviously. So they make less money than a Spotify, but they still make money. And they also capture market share because it's cheaper. It's not cheaper, it's artists know that they're going to be rewarded a lot more on this protocol as compared to a Spotify, right? So you need this kind of a user experience, but also a better monetization model, and there'll be automatic,
mm.
a movement of artists from Web2 platforms to Web3 protocols, and then the user has no choice but to follow the artist, because that's where the best music is, where the best artists are releasing their music, etc. Right?
Yeah, that's something that's interesting that I just during the research of this episode that I came across was the Spotify cross margin, right, is 70%, right? Sorry, is 30%. 70% is their cost of goods essentially, right? So just looking at that, I mean, 30% cut, while hefty, is not you know a lot in the grand scheme of things, right? Because 70% is still, from this split, looks like it goes to the artist, right? But the issue lies in, out of that 70%, the actual artist payout from Spotify to the next entity in the value chain is around 60%, right? 10% being their variable cost. 60% out of that 60% chunk, artists still only get say 10%. So that actual main um, the part where their value basically disappears seems to be the label more than
Yeah,
the streaming service.
right. I mean, maybe, Web2 platforms can change their model and kind of keep up with the times also. It doesn't have to be an entirely new protocol. I mean,
Mm.
imagine if Spotify completely flips this model on its head and tells artists that, we'll start issuing NFTs or we'll go on chain or whatever. I don't know. I don't know. I'm just like spitballing, but yeah, the innovation can come from anywhere.
Yeah, yeah. No, definitely. I think innovation from the DSP side or the label side, I mean, both are going to unlock a lot of value for artists. So I'm sure both
Yeah.
are welcome for them from their
Yeah,
perspective.
I mean, a 50% cut is going straight to labels, right? And then really not adding 50% worth of value. So labels should be cut out and it should be, DAOs that are, run by a bunch of different users all over the world who want to come together and, sponsor and help artists, etc. And they have a vested interest in doing so because they are putting their own money on the line this time.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think this is perfect now to move into um, you know, the concluding part of the episode, which is what is possible in the short term and what's possible in the long term, right? I think short term, it's very evident that what's happening now is going to persist, at least in the immediate future, which is it's going to be isolated to being collectibles, right? That's where most of um, the perception of value is going to lie, and and some statistics to back that up is in on Spotify, 85,000 songs are uploaded per week, and less than 100 songs are minted in a week. So that shows you the difference in usage really of the technology itself. So I think that shows how early we are, right? So in the short term, I think that's. I mean, do you have an alternate point of view on that?
Uh, no, not really. Maybe, I mean, the counterpoint to that could be that there's the current way that crypto is trying to monetize Web3 music is just not reached product market fit yet. So maybe 100 songs are only being minted because most users don't care enough to go and mint an NFT. They just want ease of use. Like personally, yeah, I would love to support an artist I really like, but the way I listen to music nowadays is I go on Spotify, I go to Discover Weekly or different playlists, and I just kind of randomly go through different songs. And if I like it, I save it, right? So I don't think I'm a massive fan anymore as such of too many artists, and I wouldn't really care to invest in the long-term success of any artist in particular right now.
Mm.
So maybe, I mean, maybe that's the discrepancy that, there's just so many artists out there and so much music that you can't, there's no concept of those big albums that there used to be in the past, right? Because earlier there was lesser artists and more marketing done around just those few artists. So most people would congregate and listen to those same songs, and the artists that blew up would get crazy fan followings. I don't know if that's how it's going to continue in the future because there's just so many more artists. So maybe those more artists could monetize better using crypto because they can, earn money from a smaller percentage of super fans. But I just don't see myself as being a super fan of any particular artist in the future just because of the variety of options out there for me to listen to music. So, I mean,
Yeah, but I
yeah,
mean, maybe maybe that it's more the friction to actually be a quote unquote super fan, because right
yeah,
now if you want to invest in, say, someone you've discovered, like you mentioned, you are discovering new artists by using Spotify playlist. But if it was on the three dot menu of Spotify to say buy their NFT, their new launch, which is at whatever price, maybe you do it. Maybe the right now just going to these various platforms, connecting a wallet is where you drop off as a potential user.
yeah. Maybe there'll be a future where like if let's say for example, I think my music is obviously I think my music is good, right? So let's say that I create a playlist of lots of different artists with all their different music. Maybe curators can also be rewarded for
Correct.
their efforts, right? Let's say as a curator, I add an artist's song to my playlist, and because of my curation, he gets more plays. Maybe there's some kind of mechanism where I also get a part of the reward for being a good curator, right? Maybe there's a platform protocol which has a ranking service. The best curators are ranked, or the best playlists of the week are ranked. And if an artist's song is on your playlist and it gets ranked, then you automatically get a share to, whatever he earns from just people coming and playing music from my playlist, right? So maybe that you can incentivize other people also, like curators, etc., to, you know, actually care about curating it better because they can also maybe earn from it.
Right. No, absolutely. I think, and interestingly, Zora does have that feature. It allows NFTs to, allows minters to encode this exact item, which is a curation fee or whatever, curation commission. So that's definitely something that I do agree, that, is in the long term definitely one of the avenues of revenue generation, discovery methods, and so on. But yeah, so let's just quickly, wrap this up by going through the long term um, promises really, that we've discussed already. But some last touch points that I'd like to make is, I still think middlemen will exist, right? Like I mentioned earlier, I don't think Web3 is going to completely disintermediate all middlemen. I think that's unrealistic. Case in point was, in terms of royalties, what I was mentioning, that songs are still going to be played off chain, across geographies. So you're still going to need these middlemen to really, just keep a tab on everything and ensure values attributed to the right people. Um, Second, I still think Web2 will play a large role in discovery and music consumption, or Web2 or Web 2.5, whatever you want to call it. Um, uh, like in terms of large, uh, you know, entities like Spotify, like the DSPs, really to really shift that whole consumption habit to a Web3 native platform like a Audius. um, I don't see how that will, be a 10x upgrade that will actually incentivize that huge shift, because it's, has its own frictions. So I think, Spotify in the intermediate to long term is still going to be, you know where the value of the NFT eventually comes from, right? So more streams on Spotify equals the NFT actually being more valuable, right? And of course, like I was mentioning earlier, the Discover Weekly playlist is still going to be that real estate for music, key real estate for music discovery. Um, so I don't think that's going to go anytime. One thing that you mentioned rightfully was, the music VC DAOs, right? In terms of crowdsourcing the discovery, right, of new artists. And this also, I think you were mentioning last time on the audience episodes, is something that Multicoin is very bullish on, um, right? uh, so I mean, I'm personally not. I mean, their whole thesis, right, was that label functions, right, are going to be, or what labels used to do and what they're doing now, is just going to be just co-opted in a much better fashion by DAOs, essentially in a DAO structure. So from scouting, financing, marketing, and then, distribution, is all going to be consolidated by this one entity called a music VC DAO. Um, Personally, I mean, I see its possibility, but I don't think that it's necessary, right? Scouting and financing, sure, that can be done, through a DAO collective for sure. um, because, you need that treasury to finance it, you need that governance and whatnot, and then the scouting is, because the DAO is, distributed in nature, can be crowdsourced. But then, I mean, I'll ask you this from a marketing perspective, right? Can't Why does that need to be consolidated? Why can't that just be done by a agency that is specialized in that domain, right? Um, and
I
from a
mean,
distribution standpoint,
the way I see it is, crypto and tokens inherently, they have a aspect of marketing to them, right? If like even in DeFi example, tokens are used as a method of customer acquisition, basically, right? And I mean, it's not a sustainable model, but they still use liquidity mining to incentivize people bringing in more liquidity into the platform. So there's, deeper liquidity, better, more efficient markets, so more users come in, etc. They can kind of do the same thing for Web3 music, where you use tokens as your inherent marketing device. So I mean, I'm not sure exactly what model they would employ, but if an artist releases a token that automatically garners him attention, maybe not from the music world, but from the crypto world. But if, more and more people are kind of become habituated to crypto and they hear about this news, etc., and more artists start getting in to these kind of Web3 models, then that's at least early adopters get that free marketing just because they're crypto native as compared to just a normal artist, right? So yeah, maybe you do need marketing agencies, but I think there'll be entirely new forms and models used to market that were not possible only in the Web2 world.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think forms of marketing will exist, will come to be. But my only contention here is, um, marketing is a complex activity on its own, right? It has a lot of moving parts, which are completely different from, say, the scouting and financing aspects. So when you have marketing, a whole new domain, and of course Web2 marketing isn't going anywhere. I mean, I think that's it's going to be a hybrid context we're going to be living in.
Yeah.
So agencies that have already their Web2 expertise and that develop a Web3 expertise, just as how offline marketing had to develop online marketing skills. Now online marketing skills has to develop Web3 skills, right? I think that whole phenomenon of marketing agencies, I don't know. I personally feel that that is a better setup to actually execute on the objectives of marketing, as opposed to, say, a VC DAO trying to do everything. I mean, I don't know. I guess this is something that we'll see how it plays out, really. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it could also be different that have different functions and use each other's
Correct.
resources also, right? I mean, DAOs basically they need to function as efficiently as companies. So it only makes sense for a DAO to do the things they're doing if they're efficient at it, right? If they're just going to become a conglomerate and they kind of suck at everything,
Yeah,
then the
yeah,
DAO is not going to succeed. So
correct.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if we'll see, very, very general music VC DAOs that do everything, because then they just become decentralized record labels, and maybe that model isn't best. And maybe you need specialization where there's a discovery DAO, there's a marketing DAO, there's a, you know, collaboration DAO. I don't know, like different
Yeah,
things DAOs can do and kind of be the best at that particular thing.
correct. No, no, fair point. I think it's the same issue with any company, really. It's just don't
Yeah.
do things they're not good at,
The
right?
more you kind of branch out from your specialization, the tougher it is to find synergies, and the
Correct.
more you have to spend to kind of be efficient at the next thing you want to do.
Right, right. Absolutely. So just on last point that I think is absolutely vital, really, is the industry's approach to, and when I say industry, I mean the whole music industry as a whole, all the stakeholders, their approach to copyright, right, will, in my opinion, determine the success of Web3 music, right? And the reason I say this is because, of course, copyright has to be figured out. I think, and I think eventually it will, but how it does, right, is what will make the difference. And what I mean by that is, if you take the gaming and music example again, right? If you just compare those two industries, they both have a whole bunch of UGC. I mean, UGC is actually the lifeblood of gaming, really, right? Through streaming and whatnot. But if you look into the evolution of that industry, the the gaming stakeholders, they embraced UGC. They did not, clamp down on, when XYZ copyright was whatever, violated or whatever. At the same time, music did that. they, Napster, and then of course the whole slew of incidents, all the way to SoundCloud. And I mean, I'm sure you're more than aware of how music has been, music copyright has been a pretty complex beast, uh, again, and it has worked against artists. So I think how they approach copyright with this Web3 paradigm will eventually determine its success, and how value, if value eventually, if significant value eventually transfers to the artist, right?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's all I have from my
Yeah.
side.
Yeah. If I were to say a closing point is a crucial question that needs to be answered and that all our listeners and anyone interested in the space should kind of be aware of is whether, you know, music is going to go from Web 2 to Web 2.5 or Web 2 to Web 3, and whether there needs to be, kind of 0 to 1 type progress made and a completely revolutionary new way of listening to music, or is the existing way good enough if just a few tweaks are made to it, right? Because Spotify, Apple Music have built up massive user bases, and there's inherent network effects in having such a large number of users, right? And they are not going to give up their users without a fight. So is it that platforms will pivot somehow and, to stem the, creators leaving and trying to monetize through crypto, maybe they better their terms, etc., they renegotiate with record labels, etc.? Or is it just going to be, in the next 10 years, we're going to be listening to music in a completely different way where NFTs are the norm, and, microtransactions on protocols are how you listen to music, and artists do get a lion's share of the profits like they rightfully deserve. So it's an open question that no one really knows the answer to. And I think that's the most crucial question that you'll end up realizing that you need to figure out, right? Because that's where the value of crypto will be seen or it won't be seen.
Yep. Awesome. I think that's a good place to end.
Yep.
So with that, thanks guys for tuning into another episode of the Genesis Blog podcast. Until the next episode, take care.
See you guys. Peace.